Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're, a board member, an executive director, or really just someone invested in the nonprofit world, you understand that compliance, it's everything, is just as crucial as the mission itself.
Absolutely.
So today, we're zeroing in on the regulatory landscape, specifically Canadian charity law.
And this is definitely a high-stakes deep dive. We're drawing from, well, basically a collection of the most critical questions and common errors flagged by charity lawyers, things that put organizations directly at risk with the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency.
Yeah, we're aiming to cut through all that dense legal text. We want to pull out, say,
Yeah.
4 key compliance takeaways that leaders really need to know. We'll cover things like the big changes in political advocacy and maybe some surprising facts about director residency. Our goal here is simple. Give you a shortcut to being informed and, frankly, protected.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's dig in. And let's start with something the sources basically call the cardinal sin of charity compliance.
Yeah, we have to start here. It's possibly the single most dangerous misunderstanding out there. It's this idea that one registered charity can sort of lend its registration number to another group that's still waiting for its own CRA approval.
Okay. On the surface, that might sound like, just helping out a new group, maybe like a temporary fiscal sponsorship thing.
It's definitely not fiscal sponsorship, and the answer from the CRA is a very clear, very emphatic no. It's non-negotiable.
Not even a little bit.
No. The CRA guidance is explicit. Under no circumstance should a registered charity lend its registration number. It's a hard rule. It exists to protect the whole system of tax receipting, the integrity of it.
Okay, this is where it gets really critical for listeners, I think. The consequences. They fall on the charity that lends the number, right? Why is lending that number so immediately risky for the established charity?
Well, because the moment Charity A gives its number to Organization B, Charity A becomes legally responsible, 100% responsible for every single tax receipt issued using that number.
Wow.
And the key part is Charity A has to report all the money raised by Organization B on its own annual information return.
That's the T3010 form, right?
Yeah.
Just so everyone's clear.
Exactly, the T3010. So when filling that out, the lending charity is effectively saying, yes, we receive these funds and we use them for our own charitable purposes, but if they never actually saw or controlled that money, if Organization B was running the show,
then they're misrepresenting their activities to the CRA. Massively.
Precisely. The fundamental error is misrepresenting control. They're attesting to control they didn't have over funds likely not used for their specific mission.
And the fallout isn't just like a slap on the wrist.
Oh, no. It can lead straight to revocation of charitable status for the lender. Plus, you're looking at significant penalties for issuing incorrect receipts. It's never worth the risk. Good intentions don't change the rules here.
Right. So the clear takeaway is, if you're a new organization waiting for status, you need to find other ways, proper ways.
Yes. Temporary fundraising methods that don't involve borrowing a number. If issuing receipts is absolutely critical right away, they need a formal, legally sound structure, maybe a proper agency agreement, maybe a real fiscal sponsorship model set up correctly with legal advice.
Not just borrowing a number and hoping for the best.
Exactly. Don't put your own charity's existence on the line for someone else's shortcut.
Okay, that's a sobering start. Let's shift gears now. We've talked about who's responsible for the money. Now let's talk about advocacy and political activities. There was that huge overhaul back in December 2018.
Yes, that was a really significant shift, a game changer, honestly. It was mostly about removing those sort of artificial limits that charities faced. Before 2018, there was that general rule. You could only use about 10% of your resources, money, time, everything, on non-partisan political activities. It was a numbers game.
So a big environmental group, for example, could only spend 10 cents of every dollar on advocating for, say, better climate policy.
That was basically the restriction. And that specific 10% cap, it's gone now. At least for activities classified as public policy dialogue and development activities, PBDAs.
PBDA. Okay, that's a bit of jargon. What does that actually cover in practice?
It means a charity could, theoretically, dedicate a huge chunk of its resources, 50%, 80%, maybe even all of them, to trying to influence laws, policies, or public opinion. If, and this is the big if, those activities relate directly to their charitable purpose.
Okay, so more freedom, but there's still rules about the type of activity, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned 3 criteria the CRA looks for.
Exactly. 3 crucial tests. First, the activity has to be strictly non-partisan. This is non-negotiable. No supporting, no opposing any political party or candidate. Direct or indirect.
Got it. Non-partisan. What's number 2?
Second, it must be clearly connected to the charity's stated charitable purposes. If you're registered to relieve poverty, you can't suddenly start lobbying heavily on, say, foreign trade agreements unless you can draw a very clear direct line back to poverty alleviation.
Makes sense. And the third?
Third, it has to provide a public benefit. The goal must be improving something for the community or society, not just advancing the private interests of the charity or its members.
Okay, what's really interesting here, the sources point out that more flexibility also brought way more scrutiny, just scrutiny on different things. It's not about counting the dollars anymore. It's about proving your intent, right? How does the CRA actually judge if something is nonpartisan?
Well, they're looking for evidence. Evidence that your focus is on the issue, the policy itself, not the politician or the party advocating for it. So for you, the listener, this means the compliance burden shifts. It's less about accounting spreadsheets and more about meticulous record keeping of your why, your internal rationale.
So let's say my charity publishes a report that's critical of a current government policy. I need to have like board minutes or internal memos showing why we did this research, how it connects to our charitable objects, and what steps we took to ensure it was presented neutrally, focused on the policy, not the politicians.
Absolutely. You need to demonstrate the board approved it based on its charitable mandate. You need proof that you're fostering dialogue and development, which is seen as educational rather than just, attacking opponents. The CRA has something like 20 different areas they might examine now to check for partisanship. Proving you're nonpartisan and purpose-driven is key.
And that connects directly to another point the sources really hammered home, updating founding documents. Lots of charities have statements of purpose, their objects, that haven't been touched since maybe the 90s.
That's a huge potential issue.
If your charity is now heavily involved in policy work, but your official objects only talk about, providing direct services, that's a mismatch, isn't it? A compliance risk.
It absolutely is. You have to ensure your stated purposes are broad enough or updated to genuinely cover the advocacy work you're actually doing now. Reviewing and, if necessary, amending those objects isn't just good housekeeping anymore. It's fundamental risk management.
Okay, good advice. Let's move from advocacy to governance structure. Let's tackle a myth I hear quite often, especially for groups working internationally. Director residency. Do all directors of a Canadian registered charity have to live in Canada?
It's actually surprisingly flexible on this point. There's no single law saying every director must be a Canadian resident. That's a common misunderstanding. The residency requirement really applies to the charity itself, the entity, not automatically to every single person on the board.
Interesting. So that could open up possibilities for bringing in global expertise. But you're saying it depends on how the charity is legally set up. What if it's incorporated, either federally or provincially?
Right. If your charity is incorporated in Canada federally or under a provincial act, it's automatically considered a Canadian resident just by virtue of being incorporated here. Simple as that. In that case, legally speaking, your directors could live anywhere.
Anywhere in the world?
Legally, yes, for corporations.
Right.
But the rules are very different if you're set up as a trust.
Ah, okay. How does it work for a trust?
Think of it this way. An incorporated charity is like a legal person created in Canada. Its home base is here regardless of where the managers are. A trust, though, it's more about who holds and manages the assets. For a trust to be considered resident in Canada and maintain its status, the rule is that a majority of its trustees must reside in Canada.
Okay, that's a crucial difference. So incorporated directors can be anywhere. Trust. Need a Canadian majority on the board of trustees.
Exactly. And there's a third structure, the unincorporated association, where residency is usually determined by where the central management and control actually happens. So corporations have the most flexibility on paper. Trusts have that clear majority rule.
Okay, but let's talk practicality. Even for an incorporated charity, if you have, say, a board of 7 directors and 6 of them live outside Canada, how do you actually manage things effectively? Meetings, signing authority, bank accounts. Doesn't the CRA get concerned about whether the charity is truly being managed from Canada?
They absolutely do, and that's the huge practical caveat here. While there might not be a strict legal barrier for corporations, having a majority of non-resident directors makes it much, much harder to prove what the CRA calls proper direction and control, especially if the charity is doing work internationally or sending funds overseas.
Right. I can imagine Canadian banks might also get a bit nervous if most of the people authorizing large money transfers are outside the country.
Precisely. The CRA expects the charity to maintain genuine oversight from within Canada. demonstrating that oversight gets significantly more difficult and becomes a big red flag for audits if your board is mostly or entirely abroad, even if the incorporation status makes it legally okay. You really need to ensure the charity's operational core, its control functions, its banking remains strongly rooted in Canada.
That's really important context, especially for internationally focused groups.
Okay.
Okay, let's tackle our last compliance nugget for today.
Yeah.
This one seems more mundane, maybe, but causes confusion. Social activities.
Yes, this trips people up because, you see charities holding big galas, golf tournaments, social mixers, and it's easy to think those are the charitable activities, but we need to be really clear. Social activities, just for the sake of being social, are not charitable at law. A registered charity cannot exist primarily just to host parties or networking events.
Okay, but obviously charities do host events. So how is that allowed? When can they hold social events without jeopardizing their status?
They can, but typically only if the event fits into one of two specific categories. And critically, these activities must always be secondary, subservient to the main charitable mission.
Okay, what's the first category?
First one is fundraising. Events held clearly and specifically to raise money are generally permissible, but a couple of cautions. The money raised should significantly outweigh the cost and effort of the event itself. And these fundraising events can't become so frequent or dominant that they effectively become the charity's main purpose instead of the actual charitable work.
All right, so the fundraising has to actually raise funds efficiently
Yeah.
and not take over. What's the second okay category?
The second is incidental activities. These are social events that directly support or complement the core charitable work. For example, if you run a program for newcomer youth, holding a welcome picnic or a year-end celebration for those participants, that's likely fine. It's incidental to the program. It supports the mission by building community among beneficiaries. The event serves the charitable purpose. It's not an end in itself.
Okay. Is there any kind of measurable limit? How much social activity is too much before the CRA starts asking questions?
There is a very important guideline here. It's not a hard law etched in stone, but it's a key benchmark the CRA uses. Generally, charities should not devote more than 10% of their total resources, and remember, resources means money, staff time, volunteer effort, property use, everything, to activities that are not strictly charitable. This includes purely social events that don't fit those two exceptions, fundraising or incidental support.
Wow, okay, 10%. So if my organization spends, say, 11% of its annual budget in staff time on a really great annual networking gala that maybe only breaks even financially, we could potentially be in trouble, even if the event feels mission-related.
That is indeed the risk, because you might be failing the test of dedicating substantially all your resources to actual charitable activities. The CRA looks at the overall picture. If managing social events starts consuming a disproportionate amount of resources compared to your core mission delivery, you risk looking like your primary focus has shifted away from your charitable objects. That 10% figure, it's a strong indicator they watch.
So, once again, the key is that the activity has to clearly serve the mission, not become the mission itself.
That's the bottom line. And if we sort of zoom out, all four of these areas we've talked about, lending numbers, political activity rules, director residency, the social event limits, they all point to the same core truth, don't they?
Yeah, what's the connecting thread?
That compliance isn't a one-off task you do when you register. It requires constant, ongoing attention. You need to understand not just the black and white rules, but the spirit behind them, why they exist.
So for everyone listening, what does this really mean day to day? It means the regulatory world is complicated, it changes, and frankly, the consequences of getting it wrong, penalties, losing your charitable status, the damage to your reputation, they're just too high to rely on guesswork or, what you think the rules are.
The charities that navigate this well are the ones that treat compliance proactively. They seek legal advice when needed, they review their governance regularly, they see it as an investment in protecting their mission.
Not just a bureaucratic chore.
Exactly.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you to consider. We talked about how the CRA is looking much more closely at a charity's stated purposes, especially with the new advocacy rules. So think about your own organization. Maybe its mission or its main activities have shifted over the last 5, 10, maybe even 20 years. Most successful organizations evolve, right? When was the last time you actually looked at and formally updated your foundational documents, those original objects you were registered under? Do those paragraphs written years ago truly reflect what you do today? Or could they be an unintentional compliance risk, just waiting to be flagged in an audit, especially with this increased CRA focus?
It's a crucial question to ask.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
And the clear message from all our sources today is, when in doubt about any of this, get professional advice. Don't risk your charitable status.